Hi guys, welcome and welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are well and I hope you guys are staying safe. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Ayotola, the creative director of So Unique by Adunni and the content creator of this YouTube channel, DIY with So Unique by Adunni. And this channel was created specifically for you. Yes, it was actually created with you in mind. So if you're interested in DIY tutorials, if you're interested in sewing videos, if you're interested in, all those kind of craft videos, definitely consider subscribing. And all you need to do is to subscribe, is to hit the subscribe button right here on your screen. It's absolutely easy and free of charge. You also want to make sure that you hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on the awesome content that I have for you. Also guys, in case you didn't know, I have a newsletter, an email list that you can subscribe to. To be fair, I actually haven't been putting out content, but I am planning on putting out content back to back now, so definitely subscribe if you're interested in hearing some little extra sewing tips that might help every now and again. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome to my OGs. You guys already know how we do it. Today is going to be another great tutorial. I'm going to be showing you guys how to make a mermaid skirt or mermaid dress. And I say mermaid skirt or dress because we already learned last week. If you haven't watched the video for last week, go ahead and catch up guys. But last week I already mentioned to you guys that a dress is a combination of a bodice and a skirt. So the bodice is the upper part of the garment, and then the skirt is usually referred to as the lower part of a garment. So basically when you say a dress, you're talking about the upper part as well as the lower part of the garment. So whether you want to sew, if you want to sew or dress, you're going to be starting with a skirt. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to make a mermaid skirt. And if you decide you want yours to be a dress, you can definitely make it a dress by adding your bodice to it. Really easy guys. So yes, last week we made the pattern for what I'm going to be doing today. And if you haven't seen that video already, I'm going to put a link in the icons above. Definitely check it out, as well as in the description bar below. So yes, all my links are always in the description bar. If you like any of the stuff that you see that I'm using, just check the description bar because I got you guys. Okay, thank you guys so much for all your love. Thank you so much for all your support. Thank you for leaving comments. Thank you for sharing my videos. I appreciate you guys, and without further ado, we're going to get into the video for today. Enjoy guys. To make your mermaid skirt or dress, you'll need the following items. You need your measuring tape. You'd also need your skirt block. However, I've rolled in my skirt block and my bodice block together. And if you don't know how to draft a skirt block, do check out the link that I've put in the icons above. You're definitely going to need it to make a mermaid skirt or mermaid dress. You need your fabric scissors. You need your tailor's chalk. You need your fabric. I've got about 5 yards of fabric here. You need some pins. So the next thing you want to do is you want to measure out your fabric to make sure that you've got enough. Like I said, I've got about 5 yards if I remember correctly. However, I didn't need all the 5 yards. When making a mermaid skirt or mermaid dress, I recommend that you use a minimum of 2.5 yards and a maximum of 3.5 yards. If you absolutely need it very full, you can push for 4 yards. However, that might be a bit overboard. I technically just like to use 3.5 yards because that works perfectly for me. I'm really happy with the volume that I get, and I'm happy with the fit when I use 3.5 yards for bridesmaids. So basically I went ahead to measure 3.5 yards, and I just put a snip with my fabric scissors and I just tore it apart because that fabric is easy to tear. Ideally, I recommend I use the scissors to cut as opposed to tearing it through. Again, if you don't know how to read your measuring tape, do check out the video that I have on how to read a measuring tape. It's very detailed and many people have found it useful. So I've put a link in the icons above as well as in the description bar below. In case you don't know, 36 inches make a yard. After cutting out the required fabric, go ahead and fold the fabric into two so that the right side is on the inside. The importance of this is that you don't want the right sides out so that you don't make markings on the right sides. Go ahead and fold the fabric into two and then lay it on a flat surface just like I've done. Then you want to go ahead and grab the center front piece of your pattern. So as you can see, I've got the front piece of the pattern and I've made sure that it's aligned with the fold on the fabric. It's very important that it aligns. Then you want to go ahead and pin the paper to the fabric, making sure that the front aligns with the fold. Then you want to start pinning from the center front and then work your way to the side and to the top and the bottom of the paper. After pinning the pattern to the fabric, Go ahead and locate the side seam of the pattern. The side seam of the pattern is directly opposite the center front. From the hem of the side seam, go ahead and measure 4 to 6 inches up. 4 to 6 inches will be left to your discretion depending on how tightly fitted or how loosely fitted you want your mermaid skirt to look. I find that with adults, I would use anything from 4 to 5 inches. However, for youngsters, I'll use 6 inches typically, or 7 inches if they insist. However, I recommend that you keep it between 4 to 6 inches for the shaping. After marking 4 to 6 inches from the hem upwards, go ahead and mark out the side seam allowance. I'm using a side seam allowance of 1 inch, and I went ahead to mark that from the waist downwards up until the 6 inches mark that I put earlier. After marking 4 to 6 inches from the hem, go ahead and mark half an inch at the exact point where you put your previous marking. So if you marked at 4 inches, go ahead and mark half an inch at that point. Or if you marked at 6 inches like me, go ahead and mark half an inch at that point, just like I've shown. Next, go ahead and mark the desired skirt length, which is the vertical measurement from the waist to the floor, or the desired length. You want to go ahead and mark it from the waist on paper on the pattern and mark it to the desired length, taking account the heels or the measurement of the heels that the person will be wearing. After marking the desired length, you want to go ahead and roll a horizontal line at that point, which is what I have done. The next thing to do is to draw a slant line from that point where I'm pointing at now to the hem. However, we don't know where it's going to stop at the hem, and the best calculation for this is to do half of the entire hip measurement. So for instance, if the person's hip is 40 inches, you want to go ahead and mark 20 inches while it's unfold, meaning that when you open up the fabric, it will still be the person's hip measurement, which is 40, because the fabric has been folded into two. So again, if the person's hip measurement is 60 inches, you're going to go ahead and mark 30 inches while it's folded, so that when it opens up, it becomes 60 inches again. I hope this makes sense. After marking that point at the hem, you want to go ahead and draw the slant line from the hem to the half-inch mark that we put around the knee area. After marking out the points, go ahead and cut out the skirt as shown. You want to make sure that you cut carefully and that you take care, because this fabric, or the fabrics that you usually use for this kind of dresses, are usually slippery in nature. So I've got this one which is like Duchess satin, and it's a bit slippery, so you want to make sure that you take care if you're using any fabric like this and you cut it out accordingly. When you get to the area where there's a notch, which is where it becomes a mermaid skirt, you want to pay attention and cut according to the shape. Go ahead and measure half an inch sewing allowance at the waist and then cut off the excess fabric as well. Alright guys, it's important that I mention that with this particular dress that I'm making, the bottom part is not lined. That means the skirt bit is not lined. However, usually when I do this and I'm adding lining, what I'll do with the lining is that I will cut it using the skirt pattern so that it's exactly the shape of the skirt pattern. The only difference is that it would not be as long as the skirt pattern, but it will stop exactly where I put the notch for the mermaid. So for instance, if I measured the notch at 4 inches above the hem, it will be at 4 inches above the hem in length, and if I measured the notch at 6 inches above the hem, the skirts or the lining will stop at that length. So I just wanted to quickly mention to you guys. The next thing to do is to pin the back piece onto the fabric so that you can cut out the back piece. However, before you do that, you must make sure that you're maximizing the fabric as much as possible. So if you were cutting the front one and the front one was at the top, when it's time to cut the back one, you must make sure that it's on the reverse side or on the opposite side. So as you notice, when I was cutting out the front piece, it was closer to the camera at the top. However, for the back piece, it's at the opposite end. This helps you maximize your fabric. Go ahead and pin the back piece onto the fabric, making sure that you pin it in the middle. The reason for pinning it in the middle is because when you're cutting out the back piece, there has to be a tail at the center back. So basically, unlike the front piece where you only slant out at the side seam, for the back piece, you'll be slanting out at the side seam as well as at the center back so that you can have a tail or a train. Similarly to the front piece, Go ahead and measure out 6 inches from the hem upwards. You want to go ahead and mark this at the side seam as well as at the center back. Unlike the front piece where we only mark this at the side seam, this needs to be done at both sides because there will be a tail or a train at the center back like I mentioned earlier, and there will still be the slant at the side seam. So go ahead and mark that. After doing that, you want to go ahead and mark out the sewing allowances around the side seam, the center back and the waist area. After marking out the sewing allowance, the next thing you want to do is you want to mark the skirt length. So go ahead and mark out the skirt length and draw a horizontal line to indicate the skirt length. After marking the skirt length, the next thing to do is to determine how we want to draw the slant. Unfortunately, you can't just draw the slant anyhow you want. It has to be calculated. Now, if you remember when we're doing the center front, what we did is that from the center front, which is the straight and the folded edge, we went ahead to calculate half of the person's hip measurement while it was on fold. So we're going to repeat the same thing. And to do that, what you want to do is you want to make a guideline because on the back, we have no straight parts. So what I like to do is with the help of my ruler, I tend to rule a straight line from the center back all the way down and then another straight line from the side seam all the way down. So we're going to take this one at a time. Starting with the center back, I went ahead to draw a straight line as you can see, and then from that straight line point, I went ahead to mark half the person's hip measurement. You have to remember that it's on fold now. So basically by the time we open it up, it will be double the person's hip, or it will be the person's hip measurement rather. So I went ahead to do that and also mark that point. Next, I went ahead to mark half an inch at the 6 inches points that we raised around the side seam area. After marking half an inch, I went ahead to draw the slant line from that point up onto the hem. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to pin it in place because like I said, this fabric is quite slippery and my table is not wide enough, so I'm going to have to pin it in place properly and then move it over so that we can repeat this entire process on the other side. To repeat the entire process, you want to go ahead and draw a straight line starting from the side seam. You want to draw this line all the way down. After drawing the straight line all the way down, from the point where the straight line meets the hem, you want to go ahead and mark the person's hip measurement divided by 2, which is essentially the same. Now, if you want to give it more of a tail or a bit of a tail, it'll be nicer to make it a little bit more. So you can go ahead and add 5 to 10 inches based on your discretion. Mark half an inch at the 6 inches raised point from the hem and then go ahead and draw in a slant line so that you have your tail. So at this point guys, we have our tail and then we have our mermaid skirt. Go ahead and cut out the skirt as shown. After cutting out the skirt, this is what it looks like, and I don't know if you guys can see, but this is an idea of how full it is, even though it's folded right now or it's into two. Imagine after sewing it how full it's going to be. It's going to be really full, and I've only used 3.5 inches, and whatever is left is still enough for me to make my bodice. So the next thing to do is to start sewing, and you guys know how I like to do it. I like to notch my darts and sew my darts in place. If you don't know how to sew a dart, go and check out the videos that I have on how to sew a skirt. I explain in details how to sew the dart. However, in this video I will not be going over that again. Because the center back and the side seam can look very similar, I tend to create a notch around the center back so that I can tell it apart and also hold it in place with pins while I take out all the remaining pins from the pattern so that I can separate the pattern from the fabric. So go ahead and remove all the pins on the pattern, and then go ahead and hold the center back in place with some pins. Go ahead and sew your dart in place. After sewing the dart, you should have something that looks like this. So as you can see, the dart has been sewn in place, and this is what it looks like. The next thing to do is to sew the center back, and for this you want to go ahead and make sure that it's pinned all the way from the waist to the hem if you like. If you find it very convenient to pin, go ahead and pin. Starting from the waist, go ahead and mark 9 inches vertically. From that 9 inches point, you want to go ahead and mark the sewing allowance all the way down. The sewing allowance I left is 1 inch, so I went ahead to mark 1 inch from the 9 inches point up until where I have the notch, and then from the point where I have the notch, you want to go ahead and mark 1/2 inch up until the hem. The reasons why it changes from 1 inch to 1/2 inch is because there's a notch there, and that notch has kind of chopped off the excess that we're supposed to have. So you want to mark 1 inch all the way from the 9 inch points to the notch, and then you want to go ahead and sew 1/2 inch all the way from the notch to the hem. After sewing the back pieces together, here's what it looks like. The next thing to do is to focus on the front piece so that we can sew the dart on the front piece and then place it on this back piece and sew the sides together. So we're nearly finished, guys. For the front piece, start off by marking out the darts and then sewing the darts in place. After sewing the darts on the front piece, here's what it looks like. Go ahead and place the front piece on the back piece or the back piece on the front piece. It doesn't really matter. Just place both pieces on each other so that the right sides are facing each other. Afterwards, you want to make sure that they align around the notch area and along the waist area, and you want to go ahead and pin the sides all the way from the waist to the notch and then from the notch to the hem. Repeat this on the other side as well. After pinning the sides of the front and back pieces together, go ahead and mark out the sewing allowance that you left. I left a sewing allowance of 1 inch, so I went ahead to mark 1 inch from the waist to the notch area on both sides, and then 1/2 inch from the notch area to the hem on both sides. After pinning the sides together and marking out the sewing allowance, go ahead and sew the sides together. So at this point, I've gone ahead to sew one side and this is what it looks like. I'm going to go ahead and sew the second side as well so you can see what it looks like. After sewing both sides, this is what the skirt is looking like now. I don't know if I mentioned at the beginning that this is going to be a dress, so I'm sure eventually in one of these videos that I make soon, I will show you what the full dress looks like. However, for now, this is the part that you get to see, the bottom part of it. And I don't know if you can tell, but it's already very mermaidish. I'll put another picture of something that I have made using the same principle so you guys can see how the effect will end up looking regardless of the fabric if you follow the same principles that I've shared here. Alright guys, we've come to the very end of this tutorial. Thank you so much for sticking with me to the very end. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope it was worth your while. All the pictures included at the end was created and made by me. Thank you to all the brides that have chosen So Unique by Adunni for their bridesmaids. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to leave your comments, suggestions and feedback. Thank you so much for sticking with me and I'll see you in my next video next week. Bye guys.